reason that I'm here is because the club is seeking change.
He said, well, whether you come or not, you're going to see a completely different Spurs team under me.
My hope and my desire and what I'm going to try and do is give our supporters hope and belief that we're going to embark on something special.
Welcome into the Tottenham Depot. I am your host, Andrew. You can follow me at Stetka. You can follow us at Tottenham Depot. This is episode 233, and you can consider this a bit of a preview episode because we are looking ahead to a Europa League final in Bilbao, Spain this week. We've got Scott alongside to talk about it with. He is at Scott G. Bird. Scott, what's going on, man?
Chilling. I'm just surfing LinkedIn after you mentioned that posting from the new CEO. So we're going to throw our name in the hat and see what happens. But no, I had a good weekend, all jokes aside. Took the boy out to his first live match last night, a little USL League 2 action. And now just enjoying a Sunday morning and more specifically a weekend with no Premier League football to get in our way.
That's true. It certainly will not get in our way this weekend. By the way, I hope you're not joking about that. You should submit.
I'm going to apply. I'm going to apply.
Caroline is also with us. She is at CG Stefko. Caroline, how's your Sunday?
It's been good. I watched the Snakes at United lose the Women's FA Cup final this morning, so that was nice.
Good.
Not so much Chelsea winning, but them losing was nice. And otherwise, just ready to pod and get out all of my feelings about the final coming up.
Yeah, the anticipation is certainly building. It is doing that. Before we get into all of that, I want to remind everyone to head on over to digitalspurs.com for your new Tottenham merch. Digitalspurs.com has t-shirts, hoodies, crew necks, hats, all kinds of different merch. I know there's a lot of different Europa League stuff that is going to be going up as well. And I believe there's still a sale going on over at digitalspurs.com through the Europa League final. So go check that out. Let them know that we here at the Tottenham Depot sent you. Also, a little bit of housekeeping for folks. We are going to be live on Wednesday evening following the Europa League final. It'll be a few hours after the final. Some of us have to watch the final on delay, unfortunately, because of our lives just getting in the way. But mark your calendars, 9 p.m. Eastern time, 6 p.m. Pacific. We are going to go live on YouTube. This is not going to be posted as a podcast. This is purely going to be on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. And we are going to react, win or lose, happy or sad, whatever the feelings are, we're going to react. We'll take your questions via comment in during the live show. For some of our loyal listeners, if they want to try and jump in, we'll maybe try and do some of that stuff, but it's going to be a fun night. We're just going to go live on YouTube and react to what we've seen. It'll, we'll have another podcast next week, obviously following the end of the season against Brighton, and we'll be able to kind of digest things a little bit more a few days later. But this will be more of a just let's rip our thoughts off the top of our head type of show. Wednesday evening, again, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. I believe that is 2 a.m. London time. It'll be 3 a.m. in Bilbao. So if you're up late partying on that side of the world, be sure to jump in as well if you want to do that. And of course, the show will live on YouTube after if you want to consume it in that way in the days following. So be sure to join us Wednesday evening for a post Europa League final show on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. Guys, where do we want to start today? There's a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about the Villa match. We're going to preview the Man United final. Obviously, there's tons of injury stuff to talk about, unfortunately. I did however, want to start with reports this week about the future of Robert Villahamn. And this is not surprising. We talked about a little bit about this last week following Spurs Women's season wrapping up and just kind of what was next. And there's been nothing definitive as of yet, but there are some reports that Spurs are just kind of sitting on this decision right now. And, Scott, you brought up the CEO, whose name I'm always going to stumble over, Venkatesham, who is, we think going to be in charge of this, but he hasn't even really started in his role technically as of yet. So we're probably going to have to wait until that happens and until some other pieces of the puzzle get put into place for Spurs going forward. But this is obviously a decision that looms large, and it kind of will determine the direction of the women's program and the club in that way. I guess just a week later, and we've all had a little bit of time to digest this. Caroline, where are you at with Robert Villahamn and his future? It doesn't sound super promising if I'm being honest, but at the same time, there's always a chance that he sticks around.
Yeah, I think Tom Gary was reporting that the club is planning to make a decision within 2 weeks of when that article was posted. So it should be within the next week that we find out one way or the other. But, for me, I kind of just feel like we've gotten to the point with Villahamn where it's hard to feel confident that he's getting the most out of the team, that the squad is developing in a meaningful way anymore. And there have also just been some rumblings, obviously unsubstantiated, but that the coaching staff was kind of breaking down, into factions, which is not a good thing. And, just kind of some rumblings also about losing portions of the dressing room. And from talking to people who were at the final game, it was kind of evident on some of the players' faces, that things are just not great there at the moment. So I am at the point where I kind of feel like a change does need to be made just for the team to be able to move on. And I think with Venkatesham coming in, this presents an opportunity to just have a fresh start across the whole club, potentially. I mean, we'll get into that, after the final, I'm sure, for the men's team. But yeah, I think we need someone to come in who's going to have the buy-in from everyone. And I think that includes fans also, because it does feel like he has lost a fan base at this point.
Yeah, we see it all the time. Kind of when organizations make changes at the top, typically that stuff trickles down, Scott. But I guess when taking not just Venkatesham joining, as CEO, but like when taking just the recruitment. I mean, we've hammered the recruitment thing over and over again, but when taking that into account as well, you would think that structures need to be built higher up than the manager in order for it to trickle down properly. So until Spurs start putting those things in place on the women's side of things, I guess I would expect there to just constantly be a revolving door and changes made, because there's nothing structurally sound in order to build something that's progressive and moving forward, right? Scotty, there you go, buddy.
Yeah, first of all, I fully agree with everything Carolyn's saying. I think, albeit unsubstantiated, if those things are happening, it's obvious and clear that changes need to be made. And I don't take anything away from Robert Villahamn. I think the move from Sweden to the Women's Super League is a jump, right? We all know that. And he handled this first season really, really well. And then, like we've talked about, key pieces of what he was doing last season were taken away from him and wound up in Manchester, right? And as Caroline mentioned, maybe things didn't go as well as they could have for those folks today. But back to the Robert of it all, I don't take anything away from him, because I think he did a really good job in that first year. But things have not gone the way that we would have liked them to from the standpoint of progression, and it is probably time to move on. But yeah, and like you say, Andrew, everything that's going to come from the top, I think, needs to be implemented across the board holistically, and not the board, sorry, just the football club holistically, right? I would love a world where both the men's and the women's team have a common footballing philosophy. I don't know how you generate that, right? And obviously, both teams will always be in different situations, and it can't be apples to apples. But I think if there's a commonality amongst what we're trying to do, again, across the organization from a footballing perspective, I think that would benefit the club as well. So it'd be really interesting to see what happens. Obviously, as Caroline said, there's going to be things that happen on the men's side of the club, right, that tie into this conversation. But I think it's probably time to move on. And if I'm a betting person, I would imagine that the CEO is probably back channeling a next step or a solution, right? And then if Robert's going to be let go, it's probably once he takes hold of his position, right? And things can actually start to officially happen, but we'll see.
Yeah, you alluded to it. The new CEO, Vinay Venkatesham, has actually put out an ad on LinkedIn, or I guess a job posting on LinkedIn, looking to hire a business operations lead to basically work alongside of him. Again, before he's even taken the role, but he's looking to fill out staff. And there's nothing wrong with any of this. It's just you want these things to be in place before the summer really gets going, and as these things kind of move along, we'll keep track of them. But again, it all starts from the top. We've always said that, the managers are interchangeable. And Scott, what you're saying about that footballing philosophy is interesting to me, because to some extent, I think there is a little bit of that going on within this club. Like, I think there is.
Yeah, I think there's an argument there.
But we've compared these two managers, Robert Villaham and Ange Postecoglou, so often, and it's like they're both almost in not the exact same spot right now, but similar spots to where their jobs are very much in limbo. And it's partially because of a lack of adaptation. It's partially because of injury issues. It's partially because of a style. There's just a lot going on with both of these men, and trying to lead their respective clubs, which is obviously the same club. But I don't know. It is an interesting thought that you would like for it all to be. You would like for the boat to all be rowing in the same direction.
Yeah,
and we haven't really seen that under the same umbrella at Spurs quite yet.
Yeah, and I think a big piece of that too is going to be whoever is in charge of directing the football operations, right? Not necessarily the CEO, but if we want to talk about the potential of somebody replacing Scott Munn, there's grumblings of Fabio Paratici being that person, right? Who knows what's going to happen, but I think
we touched on that last week, and it's like I said, there's a lot of moving parts.
There's a lot of moving pieces, but whoever that person is, whether it's Munn or someone new, and I'm betting on the latter, that person needs to, I think, oversee operations from a scouting, networking, and squad building perspective on both sides of house. If we want that common footballing philosophy, it's not just two managers who play the same type of football. I'm just going to throw this out there and manifest, right? I would love to see Ryan Mason take over the women's team, and I think it would be very interesting, not only because of the opportunity for Ryan there, but also because of the understudy that he's been for the last 5 seasons to, frankly, a handful of the greatest managers on the planet in Pochettino, Mourinho, Nuno, well, maybe actually Nuno, Conte, obviously, and now Ange Postecoglou, who, again, everything I've said about Ange, I do think he's extremely talented and will have taught Ryan a lot, not only on the footballing side of things, but just on the man management and personality side of things too. So anyways, let's manifest Ryan Mason into that position, but something's happening, I would imagine.
I honestly do not hate that shout, because I think you're onto something there, in the sense that he may have picked up the best elements of all of those coaching, their philosophies, and can maybe fuse it into something resembling a feasible plan for the women's team. And, we've been talking about how it seems like the decision to let Robert go is pretty simple, but then there's the question of who replaces him. And, the simple truth is there's just not a huge coaching pool in the women's game right now, especially that are available. And we know one of them has already ruled himself out, and that would be Matt Beard. He said he's not interested, which I don't think he was a great stylistic fit anyway. But, from like a player management perspective, I think he at least would have been an improvement, because he's very professional and has been around the game for a long time. But yeah, maybe we need to do, some creative thinking here to fill that role. And like you said, that could be a good opportunity for Ryan himself, to have that head coaching experience still at the club that he obviously is extremely passionate about. So I don't hate it.
Well, not only that, it's one of those things too, where you still want, obviously the structure has to come in from the top. You still want that, that cohesiveness as well. And again, not to continue to compare, I feel the same way that what you just said on the women's side of things. I feel the same way on the men's side of things, where if Ange Postecoglou is out, who comes in with this squad that is very much like, it's a good squad. There's a lot of young pieces, and I think that's the case on the women's side as well. There are maybe fewer good young pieces, but there are still some good young pieces on the women's side of things. But then you have other players, and I'll say this for both the men's and women's side, that are going to start to age out here really, really quickly. Like there are some veterans that are going to need to be moved on. Ben Davis, Heung-min Son, Beth England, Ash Neville, like
Drew Spence.
Drew Spence. Yes, thank you. All of these names, like you got to do something with all these players, and not to speak of them as like, you know, pieces of property, but like that's what we're talking about here. You have to build a club of players that is going to continue to refresh and you know, kind of revitalize itself with youth. And both of these teams are going to have potentially, and maybe even probably, new managers with potentially new directions that they've both been steering in over the last few years. And I think that's what makes it really tough, is who is that person on both sides of things to come in if that is the case on both the men's and women's side. Sorry, Scott, I think I cut you off.
No, I think it's all really well said. I was just gonna, you know, I was two things. I was going to ask Caroline if she thought there was anybody out of the NWSL that might be interested in making a move across the pond. One person that I would love to see come back to England is Laura Harvey. I don't know if she's ever interested in doing that, right? But she is English, and I think she's one of the heaviest hitters in the women's game, to be honest. And I do have an affinity to Seattle Reign, right? So there's probably a slight bias there, but I'd be interested to see if Laura Harvey was interested in coming home if I were in charge of the club at the moment.
Yeah, I unfortunately think it would be hard to pry Harvey away from the Reign because she is just so committed to them.
Yeah.
Really stuck with them through their rebuild, which it looks like they may finally be starting to come out on the other side of, you know, fingers crossed for them. I like the Reign too. But, you know, the other really obvious one is that it would be great to convince Juan Carlos Amoros to come home. I don't think that's particularly likely yet because he just signed a pretty lengthy contract extension with Gotham. But if we're going to get, you know, again, creative because of the limited pool, I think Sam Lady, who is the interim manager at Angel City, he's obviously being replaced by Alexander Strauss from Bayern, you know, imminently. And I think he's done a pretty decent job, honestly. And, you know, he's been working with some great players. So I think he could be someone who will know how to unlock our attacking talent that we have in the squad and hopefully recruit more. Another one might be Yolanda Thomas, who is an assistant to Seb Hines at the Orlando Pride. She's been getting a lot of attention in the media of, you know, is she ready to take that next step and be a head coach? And obviously she's been learning from someone very capable in Seb Hines. Like, I really respect his game. So, you know, I would love for Spurs to like acknowledge that the NWSL exists, period. And that goes for player recruitment too, because we really have not seen that since Rianne Skinner's day, when we really had that kind of connection with the Pride where we were frequently pulling players from them. But, you know, otherwise it's like the league doesn't exist to Spurs. So that's been frustrating.
It exists to everyone else too. So it might as well exist to Spurs. That would be really, really nice. Want to move on to some news and notes from the week. It was announced that Spurs are heading back to Germany to face Bayern Munich in a preseason friendly. I shouldn't say friendly. This is the Telecom Cup that we're talking about. Another opportunity for Spurs to lift a trophy in the coming months. Of course, they'll have one here in a few days, but they'll have a chance to lift the Telecom Cup at the Allianz Arena in August the 7th. I guess, Caroline, the biggest question of this is, which team is Harry Kane going to be playing for in this match?
Hey, it could be neither for all we know. I don't know. He has kind of, it sounds like he maybe does intend to stay with Bayern past his obligatory trophy.
Yes, I was kidding, folks. Like calm down. That was
the bigger question, honestly, is which team is Matthias Tell going to be on?
That is a very big question.
I'm hoping that it's Spurs because honestly, I feel like he has shown enough in his loan so far to show exactly what he can offer to the team, and I just don't think he's going to get the minutes, the development that he needs at Bayern if Kane is still there, frankly. So.
Well, and you know something, I've heard so many people balk at the price tag. Not that I think Spurs are going to pay full price, because there's a lot of financial wheeling and dealing that Spurs could do with Bayern based on the Harry Kane deal and everything else. But like, I just don't know why you would not want that opportunity for Tell in Spurs side, like especially with what I was just talking about with players like Heung-min Son, who are on the latter half of things. You're gonna need more youth in that spot, and Tell to me is that guy. I'm not saying that he's going to turn into the global superstar that we would all hope for him, but I think he's more than capable and I agree, has shown that in his loan spell. It would be really, really nice if he was playing in Lily White for this preseason game, obviously, but it would be nice.
Yeah, Tell's an interesting one because the majority of people, I think, talk about him as if he's not barely past his teenage years, right? I believe he's 20 now. If I'm not mistaken, he could be 19, but I'm going to say 20 for now. And 20 years old is still so fresh and young, right? But I think we don't think of him as the same as Wilson Odobert or, I don't want to say Mikey Moore as a 17-year-old, but let's say Lucas Bergwall, right? I think we kind of hold Tell in a level above that teenage bracket, right? Because of what he's done already at this point in his career, right? He has trophies. He's racked up a good handful of Champions League starts and appearances, right? So, especially considering we're probably going to end up with a new manager. I don't know how there would be any world where you don't want Matheus Tell to potentially be a part of whatever happens next.
I totally
Well, and you
agree.
bring up a good point there. Assuming we win this final on Wednesday and we're in the Champions League, that's a player who already has that experience in the competition.
Yeah, good point.
And also, I think the connection he's shown with Wilson Odobert is very promising, and I would like to see that continue as well.
Maybe even would like to see it Wednesday night, but we'll touch on that momentarily. By the way, you were exactly right. Tell just turned 20 last month, so still a very young player and, right in line for that. Spurs and Bayern, of course, met twice in the preseason last year. It was the whole Harry Kane and Eric Dyer of it all. So it is, I guess, kind of interesting that these two teams have developed a little bit of okay, we're going to do it. They're probably going to keep doing this for a while, like just have a preseason match, call it the Telecom Cup or the Who Gives a Shit preseason cup. Like that's all.
It's the Caroline Stefco Derby, obviously.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. They maybe they should come up with some kind of a trophy with your likeness. That would be fun. They can just hoist that.
Caroline's face on the trophy.
Yeah, we need cups. Like we need, like, especially after we get this one out of the way on Wednesday, we're going to need more of them, obviously. Spurs are also playing Arsenal, of course, this preseason. That match is being played in, I want to say, Hong Kong.
I think so.
Yeah. So like the summer schedule certainly starting to fill up. That's part of it. The other part we wanted to touch on was loan players, Caroline. You've been kind of tracking this for us a little bit. Some loan players having good tail ends of the season. Did you want to touch on any of that?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one is that, Leyton Orient, a club that we already have a pretty close relationship with, they've got two of our players on loan this season. So Josh Keeley, the goalkeeper, and Jamie Donnelly, midfielder. And they've both just had really standout seasons to the point that they won several awards at the club awards last week. And they're in the playoffs, to get promoted to the championship, and they're into the final. And Josh Keeley played a big part in that because he made a save in the penalty shootout. He's had a really great season overall. He led the league in goals prevented, and Jamie Donnelly actually was the assist leader for League One. So, they certainly have proven that they can compete in adult football, which is great. We've also got George Abbott, who's on loan at Notts County in League Two. And they unfortunately got knocked out of the playoffs this past week. They did not make it to the final, but he had a pretty strong campaign overall, 6 goals, 5 assists. And, again, just really making an impact at their loan clubs. I have not paid as much attention to our players who are in Belgium, I guess it is, at Westerlo. We've got Alfie Devine there, and also Luka Vuskovic, who obviously we haven't seen at Spurs yet, but he's going to be coming in this summer. But by all accounts, they've been playing really well and getting frequent starts. So I'm excited to see, what happens with them this summer. I would think that Vuskovic is going to come right into being involved with the first team, kind of like we've seen with a few of the younger players this year. But, Alfie Devine, I think, is still a question mark of, is that a player Spurs are going to hold on to or possibly try to get a transfer fee for. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Go all Troy Parrott on his ass. That's but there's potential for that as well, for sure. So we'll something to keep an eye on too with if there is a new manager in charge, like coming in and evaluating these players in the preseason. We just talked about, heading out to Germany and heading back to Asia this summer. Like there's going to be a lot of time for evaluation for a lot of these guys as well. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry. I'm just going to say a couple things. I think Vuskovic, I haven't watched Westerlo more than 2 or 3 times this season, right? And so I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but from all accounts, like Caroline said, he'll come right into the first team. And there's people that I think know their stuff, right, about all of this, that would put him almost third in the pecking order behind Van de Ven and Romero. And now that Kevin Danzo's here, probably not the case, right? But I maybe stick him number 4 right behind Danzo at this point in time. Obviously, the Radu of it all is still up in the air and really hinges on, I think, whoever the next manager is. But all that to say, I think Vuskovic is going to be a real talent. And then I think on the three players that just played in the playoffs, obviously 2 of them now in the final, in Keeley and Donnelly, and Abbott not getting there. Those, I think, a point that has to be made here, those playoff matches, honestly, if we're talking like the magnitude football matches, obviously Champions League, Europa League, say FA Cup, and then I think the playoff final is right there after the FA Cup. And it's different because, again, Champions League, Europa, FA Cup, will say those are huge matches, but the playoff finals, there's like a fight or flight element to that you're not going to have in an FA Cup final, right? Literally the trajectory of your life could change on that match, where an FA Cup final, you lose it. I wouldn't argue that the trajectory of your life is changing because of that, right? So those matches are just such valuable experiences for these players of ours who have obviously been doing really well this year. And I would love to see Keeley and Donnelly go straight back to Leyton Orient if they were to go up into the championship next year and just continue that path forward. I think if they don't win the final, probably not, right? I think both of those guys need to be somewhere in the championship, but it'd be super ideal if Leyton Orient could be the club that they're playing for next year in the second tier of English football. And it is cool, as Caroline pointed out, that Leyton Orient and Spurs have a pretty unique relationship. Long may that continue as well.
No question.
The other player, too, that I forgot to mention, Will Lancashire, was on loan at West Bromwich Albion. His loan did not go very well at all, unfortunately. He wasn't getting minutes. I think there was a manager change, too, mid-season, perhaps. Maybe the one who brought him in. And, he really just wasn't getting a lot of starts. So I don't think we can say that was a successful loan.
They're not all winners. Spurs have certainly proved that over the years, that they're not all great, but the ones that go well, we've got to appreciate. So we'll see what comes of that. Obviously, yeah, Scott, those promotion playoff matches are always like, they call the one, from the championship up to the Premier League, that playoff is the richest football match in the world, just because of the dollars that are coming in. So those are really, really high leverage matches for sure. So they're really interesting experiences for those guys to get. I'll tell you what was not an interesting experience was watching Tottenham Hotspur play Aston Villa on Friday. That was not interesting for me at all, but I did it. I accomplished it. It felt a little bit like a chore. I don't want to really spend too much time on this game. Of course, Aston Villa 2, Tottenham Hotspur 0. This was a match that was supposed to be played today, Sunday, but was moved because of the Europa League Final. I'm sure many Villa fans were not happy about that. It was their final home game. They wanted to be able to have that for themselves, but they got the 3 points as was expected. It's the 21st Premier League defeat for Spurs of the season, which is, of course, record-breaking in every sense of the word. Spurs with just the one match remaining, but obviously this match was just almost a fully rotated side for Spurs. I mean, you had Kinski in goal, you had Spence, Danso, Davies, and Sergio Reguilon making a start. His first Premier League start since he was in a Brentford shirt. His first Premier League start for Spurs since April of 2022. That's more than 3 years ago. Really, really incredible there. And then obviously all the questions about what was going on up front and in the midfield. You had Sarr, Gray, Odebear, Mikey Moore, Matisse Tell, and Hyunmin Sun in the group up there, and they were kind of all over the place. It will lead a little bit into the conversation about what Spurs are going to do Wednesday, but before we get there, are there any takeaways that you guys had from this match? Because I got to be honest, the first half they looked okay, and then the second half it was just like, all right, this is what we're doing here. It felt very run of the mill, like we have to put 11 bodies on the pitch. These are the 11 bodies that we're putting on the pitch, and that's that. Any other grand takeaways from Villa?
Well, I didn't actually think it was a terrible game, especially in the first half. Like, I actually was way more engaged in this one than I had been in many weeks in our Premier League games.
That's interesting to me. It
yeah,
really
no, I genuinely was enjoying it, which was a strange experience, in light of how things have been going. But obviously that kind of fell off in the second half, and I think that kind of came down to some of the substitutions, like Sarr going off with, what and just saying is precautionary, but knowing and that can mean anything.
Yeah, he said he felt something in his back, but he should be fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know.
That's the last place I want something to be hurting.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he's super injured. We all know that at this point.
He's probably like in the surgery bay as we speak, unfortunately. Yeah. Knock on wood that's not actually true. But yeah, I at least was encouraged by what I saw from the team in the first half, because really all I've been wanting from, the so-called B team during all this time is just to show some energy and some effort. And I feel like we at least got that in this game. Like I said earlier, I'm really loving the Tell and Odebear link up. If that shot had gone in, that would have been like a, highlight of the season kind of goal for me. Unfortunately, it didn't, and we lost. So nothing new there. But I don't know. This was always going to be a tough one, because obviously Aston Villa are still trying to get Champions League qualification, and it is what it is. But it was kind of fun to see Reggie out there again. I don't know.
Yes. A couple things I take away from that. I think Danzo is really talented, and I continue to like what I see from him. This match reminded me of, like, let's say like an 8th grader that has a 5th grade brother, and it was just this 8th grader and Danzo with all these 5th graders playing out on the playground, right? It was just, he's just a level above the rest of the defense, right? At this point in time. I love Ben Davies to death, but it's probably over at this point, right? And I wish him the best. Again, we've talked about it. Go to Wrexham, come back to Spurs as a coach. I'd be super ideal. I think Archie Gray, we talk about him being the 6. Dude has a long way to go before it's time for that to happen. And I don't say that as a shot at Archie Gray. He's 18 years old, and I think he's one of the most talented, well-rounded footballers on the entire squad. He's just 18. And playing, I've said it before on this show, I'll say it always, always, always. The 6 in the Premier League is the hardest position in the sport of football to play. The game is so fast and so physical, and you have to read the game perfectly to be an effective 6 in the Premier League. That's why really only one person does it well, and that's Rodri, right? So it's a really tough gig, and Gray's going to have a steep learning curve, but I think he can do it. I think Odebear is fantastic, and when he starts to really play football consistently and stays away from injuries, I think we're going to see just a brilliant talent there. And then, like Caroline already said, Odebear and Tell seem to have the recipe in front of them to develop a real partnership. And again, they're both French youth internationals, right? And have probably played together before. I would imagine it's not the first time that they've linked up, but I think there's something really special there. And but I was really, really impressed with Odebear. I think he deserved a goal that he took really well, that redirected flick or whatever that could have ended up in the back of the net and didn't. But it looks like he could be an effective 10, which probably, again, comes later in the conversation, but I was really impressed with Wilson Odebear.
Well, let's kind of shift that way, because, what I was really interested in this match was, you brought up Archie Gray playing the 6 and how difficult that is. And I agree. It's especially difficult when Spurs play the way that they typically do, but they didn't really do that in this match against Villa. They really were trying to counterattack a little bit more. which I think is good. It's a good adaptive strategy that no one thinks Ange Postecoglou has secondary plans, but obviously he's shown that he can adapt, and they were really trying to counterattack more in this match and had some good looks, especially in that first half from doing so. I guess my question would be, and obviously we're going to get into all of this with all the injuries, and we're talking about injuries to Dejan Kulusevski, whose name we have not even said on this podcast, surgery last week. Following, he left the match against, was that the Crystal Palace match that he departed, and then had to have surgery last week, so he's out. Obviously, the club is going to be missing James Maddison as well. There are still massive questions, even though Ange Postecoglou has kind of put them to bed and said Lucas Bergvall is definitely not available. There's still a lot of question about the truth to that. I know there's a lot of people who think that Lucas Bergvall, especially because he was involved in the media day ahead of the Europa League final, there's questions as to whether or not he could be actually available, and Ange is, just playing poker with that. I'm not so sure. But you brought it up, like Odegaard kind of played in that 10 role. There are, I think, other options, but not many options or great options for someone to play in that role. We could easily see something of a midfield like Bentancur, Basuma, and Sarr as well, if Sarr's back is intact. Again, question mark. Or we could see Odegaard, we could see Dom Solanke, Heung-min Son, Matisse Tell. Like, there are options, but I guess the question is, what is the best one? Because I don't know that there is a best one heading into this match. And I think with all the buildup and all of the conversation about, these two teams, Manchester United, Tottenham Hotspur, playing for a Champions League spot, sitting 16th and 17th in the Premier League table, it's all very fun and a lot of back page headline type of conversation around this game. In the end, Spurs are going to try and beat United for a fourth time this season, which is so mind-boggling. That's the part that I have not been able to, heading into this match, I have not been able to get that part of it out of my head, is that they have to beat this team for a fourth time, and how difficult that is when you've already done it 3 times. You've got to go do it a fourth. That's the part to me that this match, it's sticking in my head, and that's the part that's giving me I think the most worry. It's not the injuries, it's not all of that. It's just the fact that you're having to do this a fourth time in a season, and that's, I think, what's going to make this difficult. But where's your guys' mindset, Caroline? Let's start with you. Just lineup, attitude, mindset going into this, the nerves, all of it. Give me, and empty your notebook for me. What do you got?
Well, I, told y'all this before we started recording. I feel like the nerves are starting to hit for me in a really serious way. Because like you said, it just does feel like there's just so much narrative around this matchup with United that it just makes it even more dramatic than it already would have been if we were playing, say, Athletic Club. It wouldn't have felt quite as a serious, I think. But yeah, I think as far as lineup, I'm kind of leaning towards trust in the experienced players. If you saw my display name earlier in the pod, I believe Sonny needs to start. I think we saw enough from him in this past game that he is back to fitness. He's locked in. That looked like a player who was very determined to make the starting lineup of this European final to me. And I think we're going to need his experience and leadership, honestly, especially with some of the injuries that we have. Maddison, Kulusevski, those are players who, tend to help guide the team in these really fraught moments. So I think we're going to need them. And, as much as I thought Odegaard showed some promise at the 10, I personally think it might be a better bet to go with sort of a hybrid front 2 situation of Solanke and Richarlison, because I feel like they could play off of each other well and kind of find that balance of the hold up play, getting in the box. They've got a wide range of skills between the two of them, so I think that could be useful. And people aren't going to like to hear it, but I think you start Johnson too, because he's proven time and time again this season that he can score. And obviously he has a lot of familiarity with the other players that we're expecting to start. So, because I don't think behind them there's too much debate about who's going to start. Obviously, the back four is like set in stone. Vicario is set in stone. Like you said with Sarr, we don't really know what his availability is going to be, if he's going to be able to start or only off the bench or not at all. So that kind of complicates the midfield a little bit, but we just don't have a ton of options there right now. So
I have to imagine that this is a game that Basuma and Bentancur will start in a double pivot. Like, that's just my guess. If Postecoglou did anything different than that, it would surprise me. And I agree with you. Obviously, in the back 4/5 with the keeper, like, that is set in stone. And I think the two midfield positions in that double pivot, I wouldn't say set in stone, but like the concrete is starting to harden on that, at least in my opinion. And that leaves those four spots. Based on everything you just said, that means there's no place for you for Wilson Odobert. There's no place for Mathis Tel in that starting 11 either. You would be going with like a Dom Richarlison combo up the middle and then flanked by Johnson and Son. Scott, do you have any difference in opinion there? Because I know I do, but also it doesn't really matter what I think. Like, I'm just curious because there's a lot of combinations that you could do with that front four, despite all of the injuries. It's just none of them are square pegs going into square holes. They're everything's a little bit off with any combination you put up there. So what's it look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, the situation at hand leads to a good handful of moving pieces here for sure. I mean, obviously the back line picks itself. We all know that, right? Spence will not be featured. It will be Porro and Udogie with the standard center back pairing, Vicario and net. The midfield's interesting because, first of all, let's set aside that Lucas Bergwall could start. So that's a whole other conversation, right? I doubt it. But we're just going to set it to the side that that's a possibility. We also have to consider what you said about Sarr. Is he fit? Is he not? As I said earlier, Andrew's comments, if you look at the history and the track record, he's going to be super injured because Aim said he's fine. Who knows, right? We'll see. But Basuma starts for sure. In a perfect world for me, I have Bentancur as the 10 with Basuma and Sarr behind him. And I don't know if that's necessarily a double pivot, and I'll get to that. I think Bentancur, when you look at the midfield options, is the most technical, the best in and around the box. And I think he's capable of scoring goals as well. So I would advance him a little bit more forward. But again, perfect worlds aren't always available. Let's say Sarr doesn't start, then you go Basuma Bentancur. I like what Carolyn's saying about a hybrid 2 up top, but I would actually go Son and Solanke. I think Richarlison out wide takes a little bit of pressure off him. I think he struggles in tight spaces. He seems to just play a little bit better off to the left. I think Son is actually better through the middle than he's ever shown to be as a touchline winger too. I look at the Conte season. Him and Kane really played as like a front two, right? And he played really well off of Kane. I think Solanke and Kane have similar qualities. Kane's obviously more talented, but I think Solanke is able to drop back and distribute and hold up in a way that Kane did really well. So I would like to see Son and Solanke paired up top. I also think Son's technical enough if he finds himself in that 10 situation, right? In and around the box. I think he's technical enough, especially with his 1-2s, to be effective there. And then I agree with Carolyn. Brendan Johnson has to start, and that's strictly because he's second in goal contributions, and you're in a final, and you're going to have to score a goal if you want to win a trophy, right? So I put Brendan Johnson for sure on the right side. But as Carolyn said, it's all about experience, a cup final, tactics, ability, all that really goes to the side, and it's honestly down to who wants it more and who has ice in their veins. And I think Sonny fits the mold there, in both ways. And so Son has to start. I don't think anyone on the team wants it more than Sonny does. You can never argue that there's anyone on the team who wants this more than Heung-min Son. So Sonny has to start, and that's where I would go. Son and Solanke in a hybrid 2, flanked by Richarlison and Johnson, and then Bentancur and Basuma in the midfield. The other interesting thing, Bruno Fernandes is the best player on the field in this match, hands down. I mean, there's no question there, right? And so, and I'm looking at all 22 players at start when I say that, or 20 if we omit the keepers, right? But Bruno's the best player on the field, and so how do you keep him quiet unfortunately, Kulusevski is the guy to do that for me, just with his work rate and his ability to track back and get stuck in tackles and just honestly man mark a 6. Obviously, Bruno's not a 6, but I look to what Kulu did up in Norway against Patrick Berg, and that was honestly a really good performance. As much as people want to say Kulu was awful, it's just because he didn't do anything flashy.
He was draped
kept
all over
Patrick
Berg.
Quiet.
Right.
Exactly. And so Kulu is the guy, in my opinion, to man mark Bruno for 90 minutes, but that's not an option. I would really like to say Sarr's my second option there. He might not be available. You end up looking to Basuma. My concern there is that I think Bruno can bait Basuma into cards pretty early in this match. Basuma is just a master at taking cards, and some of them unnecessary, right? Bruno is obviously a master of the dark arts. So if you're asking Basuma to play the 6, Bruno stays very advanced. He's not going to drop back at all. So again, in theory, it makes sense for Basuma to be the one man marking Bruno, but that just makes me super nervous. So I think Ange's probably biggest piece to this puzzle on Wednesday is how do you keep Bruno Fernandes quiet? And I think if he gets that right, we win. And I think if he gets that wrong, we probably lose.
I think the guy for me to do that could possibly be Bentancur if he's playing a little deeper as opposed to the 10 role where you said you would like him. When it comes to the front line, I'm definitely in the minority in thinking that Sonny is the bang on starter that you guys do, but I do think he will start. Like I just in my mind, I don't know that I would be there with him. Everyone was really praising Sonny after Friday against Villa, and I didn't see it. I didn't love it. I thought it was a lot of running with the ball and then not really knowing what to do with it. And part of that is what he was surrounded with, and just the rust and trying to knock that off and not being something still off to me. And I'm a little worried that he has rushed back from this injury in order to get into this final, which again, I think he will be in the starting 11 and rightfully so. He's the captain. He's been here, been through the ringer, but man, it just makes me nervous that if he goes out and if he executes as poorly as he did against Villa, I think it could be a long, long night in Bilbao. That said, there are so many options. I would like to see Tell start on that left side or Richarlison even with Solanke in the middle. But then it's just, again, it's a question of what you do in that midfield. The one thing I heard floated this week that intrigued me, and then I haven't really heard it anything else other than that. What if you stuck either Spence or Gray at right back and shifted Porro up into that midfield as like your playmaking, because he's going to be going forward anyway, but shift Porro into a more of a quote unquote number 10 role and play with either Gray or Spence as the right back and just see what happens. It's a lot to think about, to do in a final. It's a huge risk to do something like that, but something I heard floated that I didn't immediately just shrug off. So I thought I would bring it up as a slight possibility, but who knows? I'm worried. And Caroline, you started talking earlier about just kind of the nerves starting to set in. And I think with all of the injuries, be just starting to pile up here as they have all season, but there was a little bit of a period there where things were getting better. And then all of a sudden it took a turn for the worse with the losses of Madison, Kulusevski, Bergvall, especially for three guys who play in not the same exact position, but such similar spots on the pitch. It's really, really where the depth has been hit in that kind of creative midfield space. But for me, my nerves have not kicked in. And that's kind of what I wanted to touch on because it's so weird. And this is maybe this will come within the next 48 hours as kickoff approaches, but I am kind of comfortable with the result on Wednesday already, whatever it may be, just because I think this season has been such a shit show and it has been such an up and down, mostly down, roller coaster ride that the fact that Spurs have gotten to this point through all of this. And I do want to also continually remind people, this final was always expected to be Tottenham Hotspur versus Manchester United. Like these were always the two betting favorites to win this competition. They're going to play in the final. I know people are shocked, but that's just because of the little number next to both these teams' names in the Premier League standings. That's the reason that this is getting so much publicity. These two squads were always expected to be head and shoulders above everyone else in the Europa League. So for me, it's not I'm not like, oh my gosh, Spurs have made the Europa League final. I think it's a big deal, and it's an incredibly big deal if they win it. It's an incredibly big deal if they lose it. But that's kind of where I'm at. I just know that it's going to be a big deal, and I haven't quite gotten to the point where there's no nerves. I'm just like, what? I don't know. Maybe it's just too zen of me, but I'm very much what will be heading into this match and ready to kind of just take it on as it will. I'm really excited for our live show on Wednesday night to have a little bit of that juice and that live feeling of what have we just witnessed? Did we just witness something really devastating, which I think we've all kind of grown accustomed to as Spurs fans over the last, let's be honest, decade? Or did we just watch something really historic in Spurs launching themselves potentially into what could be a really cool era of getting back into the Champions League, decision about a manager, decision about direction, and all the things we've kind of talked about over the last hour or so? Like, that's the part that I'm excited for. It's not so much about what happens. The United of it all is the thing that I think has me almost most excited, because they're going to get, win or lose, they're going to get more shit than Spurs will. like that's just kind of the way I feel about it, and I'm pleased by that, because they are the bigger name, the more, well-known club throughout the world. If they win, it's going to, they're not even going to have a parade if they win. Whereas Spurs have already mapped out their path down the high road for their parade if they win. That's the difference between these two clubs. United doesn't almost want to experience joy. They just want to get through this. Whereas Spurs want to celebrate and want to experience this. And I love that for them, and I want it to happen. I'm like I said, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm very much just like, here we are, we're doing this. I'm trying to remain in that space where I'm not getting too amped or too nervous or too anything. I'm just kind of there. So we talked a little bit about our feelings on this before the show, and I know Caroline wanted to hear it straight from my mouth. So there it is. That's kind of where I'm at. And I don't know if you guys have any reaction to it, but that's just where I stand right now.
Well, I feel like I'm trying to, I guess, stay in the moment of the actual game itself and not dwell too much on what's going to come after, because you're right. I think it's either going to be pure elation, we're on an upward trajectory for next season, this is awesome, or we're going to be back in club in crisis mode, which no one wants to see that happen, obviously. So it's, yeah, the consequences are like, they're looming, and there's no getting around that. But I'm just trying to focus on, like, enjoy the fact that we're in a final, feel excited about it. It's fun to speculate about who's going to start. Like, I'm going to be on my phone waiting for the lineup to come out, on the dot. And then it's going to be, 90/120 minutes / possible penalties of pure anxiety. And just to circle back to who's going to play and the fact that this could come down to penalties, that's the only downside to me of starting Son, is that I don't think he has 120 minutes in him right now. So if it comes down to penalties, we're not going to have one of our best penalty takers there. And that's scary. So I don't know. I don't envy Ange. Like,
that is a part of it. I also just think that him running against tired legs 60 minutes in, 70 minutes in could be beneficial. That is part of my thinking on Sonny as well.
And Matthias has shown he's ready for this level many times, not just at Spurs. So maybe I'm coming around to your idea of having him start instead, is what I'm saying.
I don't think it's going to happen, by the way. I fully expect Sonny to be starting in this match. I mean, he started against Villa for the reason to build up the fitness to start in this match, in my opinion. But I don't know that I'm going to love that decision, especially when there are, I think, just other and better options on the left wing. Whether that's Richarlison, whether that's Tell, whether that's even Odegaard to some extent. I think Odegaard is better suited on the other side as a backup to Johnson, but I just think there are other options. But again, that mystery of who's going to play more centrally in that quote unquote number 10 role, it leaves up a number of options for what they could do. They could throw a midfielder in there. Again, they could throw Pedro Porro in there. I don't know what's going to happen. So that leads me to believe that, yeah, it's probably just going to be Sonny on the left wing and we'll go from there. But who knows? I mean, Ange has surprised us in the past, but I don't know that there's going to be much surprise. I do think Sonny's going to be in the lineup. I just don't know that I'm going to be super elated about that.
Yeah, I think there is a world where Son comes on 55, 60 minutes into the match. And whatever happens, though, I do believe that him and Ange will make a good decision together. And I think Sonny's a humble enough guy to accept that it's better for the team if he comes on later in the match, right? So whatever happens, I'll trust the decision. But I personally, I'm not nervous. I'm just really excited. It's going to be nice to watch a match and hang on every minute of that match. We don't really get to do that anymore. I'm really looking forward to that. And honestly, we're either going to be on the show Wednesday night crying, saying, I don't really know what to say. We just won a European Cup final, and that's about it. Or we're going to have a good, deep, thorough discussion on what comes next for the football club. And if that happens, we're going to be right back to where we've been since 2021, maybe. So yeah, it'll be steady as she goes either way, right? And in that regard, I kind of feel like this is a free hit for Tottenham Hotspur. If you lose this match, you're honestly right where you've been. And if you win this match, you're a European champion. And either way, I believe a new project is coming. And you're either going to, again, start from where every other project starts from, or you're going to start on the back of a European Cup, breaking the hoodoo of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club and having Champions League football to, again, kickstart that project. So either way, we're going to enjoy the ride. But I'll end this rant by saying I feel it in my bones that we're going to win this game. I just really, really, really feel that we're going to win on Wednesday. I don't know what it is. Call it intuition, but it just really feels like it's time to lift the trophy, and it feels like it's Sonny who was destined to do that after, 17 years of it not happening at this club.
There's also something that feels poetic about it being the Europa League. It's not a domestic cup. It's not the Premier League. It's not the Champions League like it could have been in 2019. And it's against Manchester United, a team that is very much right now in the same kind of dire straits that this club is, and just kind of flapping in the wind and trying to figure it out and not really sure what's going on. There is a lot of poetic nature to what could take place in Spain on Wednesday. So we will be here again, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot, reacting to it all. Come join us. We will have fun, I'm sure, despite whatever happens. And we'll obviously be back next week for another pod following the season finale at home against Brighton as well. Be sure to check us out on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. You can watch all the pods there as well as our live show on Wednesday. And if you are a pod listener, please do go leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice. That helps spread the word about the show. You can follow us on the socials at Tottenham Depot as well. You can follow Caroline at CG Stefka. You can follow Scott at Scott G Bird. You can follow me at A Stefka. We will see you all Wednesday night, come what may, following the Europa League final. Until then, this has been the Tottenham Depot podcast. As always, come on, you Spurs.